Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. I thought today I would talk about the Challenger 2E. This is a vehicle that I ended up spading during the Twitch drop event. I thought I'd do a bunch of top tier stuff because, to be honest, I haven't been grinding out a lot of it recently because I had all the tech trees researched, and then the new update came in, added a bunch of SAM systems, and I was like, you know what, why not? Let's dive into it and use the research from the spades to be able to research the new vehicles. For Britain, obviously they didn't get a new SAM, but I had the Rapier to research and also the Badger, so I thought, why not? And also, now you can grind out helicopters, so that's kind of cool. Previously, my experience with the Challengers, I have spaded out the Challenger 22F and also the Black Knight, and I'm very close to finishing the Challenger 2. I skipped the Challenger 3TD after they changed the engine on it because I could not do it again. I just could not do this fat Challenger 1200 horsepower thing, just like the Tez. I just can't do it right now. My brain just isn't there. Good luck to everybody who wants to do those. I just can't. The great thing about the Challenger 2E though, this one was designed for export, and they decided to actually put an engine in it. So this one has a 1500 horsepower engine, the MTU MT883 diesel, meaning that it moves around a little bit better than some of the others, which is fantastic. Pretty much everything else about it though is very similar to the other Challengers. There are a few little upgrades here and there, but nothing too crazy. It has a little bit of a spawn liner on the top of it, which is quite nice, but most of its standard factors are exactly the same. It has access to a first stage ammo stowage of only 4 pieces, which obviously isn't great. It has access to the basic armor layout of the Challenger, which works and doesn't work depending on where you're looking. It has a huge hole in the lower glacis. It has a huge hole basically where the breach is, where everybody just kind of pens through. And then also on the sides, it has these really interesting exterior fuel tanks, which have a habit of just eating rounds, which is quite nice. So if anybody shoots you kind of just above the tracks, you actually survive a lot of the time, which you probably shouldn't. The other factors about this vehicle which make it kind of interesting are the optics on it, whereas this one has actually really good thermals, and also at the same time it has a very high commander optic, meaning that you can use that to be able to see enemies before they kind of see you coming, which I actually kind of enjoy about the vehicle. So those are kind of like some of its positives and some of its negatives. Let's talk about it compared to a lot of like the other vehicles that are around these BRs. So the problem that the Challenger has is that it is basically worse in most ways compared to other vehicles at the standard BR. And its advantages that it used to have, it no longer has because they ended up buffing everything else around this BR instead of nerfing anything, right? So the Challenger 2E as a vehicle, it has very good gun depression. Its turret rotation and targeting speed is worse than pretty much all of the standard kind of Western MBTs, if you want to call it that. It has a 30-degree turret traverse, whereas if you have a look at the Leopard 2, for example, it has a 40-degree. If you have a look at the Abrams, it has a 34-degree at the highest level. And then if you have a look at even something like the T80 BVM, that also has a 34 degree per second turret traverse. So for some reason, the Challenger 2's is just worse. It's at 31, so it's one of the lowest ones, and also its vertical vertical guidance speed is at 11 degrees. So once again, not exactly fantastic. No idea why this is the case, but basically it has the same kind of targeting speed as the Type 10, and the Type 10 is one of those vehicles that gets the benefit of the better reload. So it actually, the targeting speed is nice, but, the targeting speed's a little bit lower than others, but also you get that better reload, so it's easier to get that second shot off. The Challengers used to be really good for their reload. This thing has a 5-second reload. Guess what? There's a bunch of other vehicles now with 5-second reloads. So the Abrams, the Macarva, even stuff like the Ariete, and many others have this 5-second reload now. One of the problems with the Challenger, though, and what balanced it out before, is it has a really small first stage ammo stowage. So it only has 4 rounds where you actually fire at 5 seconds. And then after that, it increases. So when it comes to all those other vehicles, such as the Abrams they don't have that issue. They have a massive first stage ammo storage compared to the Challenger 2, so they can keep whapping out rounds over and over and over again at that 5 second. Another thing that the Challenger 2 has a kind of worse worse area for is its round. The L27A1 is probably the worst round that you have at top tier. If you compare it to the American round, if you compare it to the German round, it is way below par. If you compare it to the Russian round, I think it's about 30 millimeters less pen at 60 degrees. If you compare it to the Type 10 round, it's also about 30 or 40 degrees less when it comes to penetration. So this round is just one of the worst. So the Challenger 2 used to have this great advantage of a better reload, but it was lower in other areas, so you had to kind of make up for it. Now, it just has the same reload, worse targeting speed, and the worst round at top tier, which is just kind of wild when you actually think about it. It still has a lot of pen, and it still does completely fine, but it's just one of those things. It actually has a round which is equivalent to the Leclerc, which also has one of the worst rounds at the highest echelon of the game. Just to give you an idea of the strength of this round, it's actually worse than the one on the 122B+, and the 122B+ obviously has a lot of other advantages compared to the Challenger, such as its armor can actually tank a shot, whereas with the 2E, that's not really the case. Now, did I have a fun time in this vehicle? I did, but that's just because of the lineup, and also because I actually play pretty well with the Challengers. These vehicles are a little bit more hefty than some of the other vehicles. They're a bit more kind of counter-attacky, which can work pretty well. And nowadays, in this current meta where you actually have the SAMs, meaning that on certain maps the CAS isn't as aggressive, you can actually, wait for the enemy to push, hammer them, and then push back, and it actually works pretty well with the Challenger. Usually what you want is you want a vehicle that can be aggressive, that can give your team kind of a point to push through. But with other vehicles, sometimes you're not able to do that because of the mobility. Even with this thing having a better engine and better mobility than most of the Challengers, you're still slower than most other vehicles that are wandering around at crazy speeds. So generally, that can be a bit of a problem. The 50 cal is also nice on this vehicle. I know that sounds really weird because it's just a 50 cal, but the difference between having a 50 cal and a 30 cal in terms of damage to helicopters, in terms of damage to tracks and stuff like that, is monumentally different. The other thing that's actually really cool about this is the Black Knight. And I know that sounds really weird, but the Black Knight is a fantastic second spawn vehicle for the British because it has access to the active protection system on it. And this is the Iron Fist active protection. This is really good against CAS because a lot of the time the active protection system will actually just hit the CAS munitions as they come in. So as a second spawn, even if you are under pressure from the enemy team, you can actually defend against it, which a lot of second spawns can't. You also have the ADATs in tow, which is kind of a fun vehicle, and also some CAS options yourself, plus all of the other challenges that are around. I hope at some point the British secretary gets more kind of modern vehicles to be able to run with the challenges, but in terms of the 2E, is this a good vehicle? It's on the lower end of the top tier vehicles. Is it better than the other Challengers? Depending on how you look at it, no. It basically has better mobility, but it has a worse gun than the TD. It also has worse survivability than the Black Knight. So it's basically what you kind of enjoy. But the other thing about it, which is cool, is you have these three vehicles that all excel at different things, meaning that depending on your playstyle, you can kind of fit it to what you want to do. Do you want a bit more mobility? Do you want a bit more survivability? Do you want a bit more firepower? It's kind of interesting to see it like that. The problem is, if you have a look at every other nation in the game, they usually have one vehicle, which has all three of these in spades, which everybody runs, so you don't have to rely on having all of these different ones. So for the Challenger 2E, it took 87 battles to spade it, 182 ground kills to 64 deaths, so a 3-to-1 KD, and a 66% win rate. As I said, I seem to do really well in these challenges. They fit at least my playstyle pretty well, but you can definitely tell they're on the lower end of these vehicles at the highest echelon. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.